It's way more than difficult.
It's way more than difficult, and our correlation to how Henry Hub moves, we're not blind to the fact that GCM prices move. They correlate to either JKM or MVP prices. That's going to be an issue, but like with the JKM came out in 2009. JKM is Japan-Korean marker. It wasn't traded on the market on the intercontinental exchange until 2013, so it took 4 years to develop. Now with the JKM, we talked with over 30 traders, producers, or consumers, and we get bids and offers, and we come up with an assessment price every day. And you can also trade it in paper form on the ICE. So I have no delusions of how close it'll be linked to other gas hubs or oil-based index. But the reason why we built the GCM is we got feedback from the market, mainly Asian utilities, saying, will you please offer a price that maybe it will be correlated strongly to other hubs, but will you please offer a third-party price that you can slowly develop based on what you're hearing in the market?
Thanks. And one other thing, I think it'd actually be really useful, Kathleen, I'm not sure how familiar everybody in the room is with FSRUs and the differences between those and the land-based. And I think it would be really useful for people to have a better understanding of what the importance is of the differentials.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that. So in 1999, so whatever that is, 17 years ago, I was at El Paso Corporation, and we faced the decision to either reactivate Elba Island or not, and we took the decision to reactivate. We also took capacity at Cove Point. We built the Altamira receiving terminal in Mexico. So we knew land-based facilities very well. But we also had an idea, which was to take heat exchangers, basically Shell and 2 heat exchangers, put them on LNG vessels, and turn them from being only vessels to being a potential import facility. The original idea was that those would be used offshore, and in fact some of them are being used offshore. So these ships, many of them, have a turret in the forward hull of the ship that allows a buoy to be attached, which connects to a subsea pipeline. And then the ship weather vanes around the buoy for wind, wave, and current, but is able to regasify LNG on board and put it down through the pipeline into the system. We also, when we were designing the ships, we actually had a coconut oil ship lose ground or lose its way in the Savannah River, and it rammed our Elba Island facility, and it broke our Chixan arms, which are the arms that connect to transfer LNG from a vessel to a land-based facility. And so we had this idea, oh, well, if we had a high-pressure arm put on our vessels, if anything like that ever happened in the future, we could just bypass it. That turned out to be, that was a $500,000 adjustment. So not very expensive, and it's turned out to be the most brilliant thing about FSRUs, because now with that kind of valve, you can sail to any deep water port in the world, which is why this is taking off so much, because the world is filled with deep water ports. In every deep water port, what do you find? Power plants, refineries, industry. So the paradigm was twofold. One, it was to greatly be able to expand the locations for imports of LNG, but it was also an early insight into the fact that it would become ultimately less expensive to do it. So today, if you were to build an Altamira, it'd be about $1 billion. If you're to build Pakistan, it's about $250 to $300 million. So it's 25 to 30% of the differential, which is very significant, and that's what's helped keep it cost competitive and the vehicle choice. I hope that. And you can do faster. You can, and many of us have, you can speculatively build these facilities before you decide where you're going to use function as everyday LNG carriers, oh, by the way, also. So the risk layers of mitigation in the overall strategy have turned out to be really nice.
Real quick, just adding to that, a great example is Egypt. They decided they were short on natural gas, and they said we need LNG to be regasified immediately. They put out a tender for an FSRU in January. In July, they received their first cargo of regasified LNG. So in 6 months, they went from a concept of receiving more LNG to 6 months later regasifying and bringing it onto the grid. So very impressive.
Just a question on the operation now. Do we have situations where the FSRU simply stays there and you have larger ships that come in and actually just keep refilling it?
Yes.
Or do you also have where, like you said, it's sort of dual use where you can fill up the FSRU and move it where you want?
Both are happening. So there are FSRUs that are in fixed locations like Egypt, for example. And so other ships that are not FSRUs are loaded from different parts of the world, taken to Egypt, offloaded, then they go sail back and collect more. That's the most efficient use because the kit that we put on our first ships was about $35 million. So about a 15% premium to the underlying vessel. So you want that kit to be used, as much as possible. But there's this whole concept, which we haven't talked about yet, which has been another major innovation in LNG, which is ship-to-ship transfer. So when we built our first FSRUs, the transfer of cryogenic liquid of any kind from one vessel to another was only authorized and supported in emergency conditions. And in fact, I believe had never been done in LNG, although every LNG carrier carries hoses that are rated to be able to transfer in an emergency situation. So what we did at Accelerate was we pioneered the commercial use of hoses for ship-to-ship transfer of cryogenic liquid. And so by the time we did that, then you could have this concept of each FSRU operating independently.
I think Accelerate just had recorded like it was 1,000 ship-to-ship
Yes.
transfer.
I'm telling you guys, that was not easy, but it was fun. It was really fun to pioneer something like that. The first company we went to when we wanted to commercialize this is we went to Shell, and Shell had like 20 engineers in their conference room, and we were warned before we went in, there's no way we're going to support this. And in about 2 hours, we had answered all of their questions. They did not want to be the first one to do it, but they have since joined the club. Everybody's doing it now.
It's just a quick question. That's Lester. Just a quick question for Chris. I don't want to stop this conversation. It's really interesting. But it's been kind of on my mind. You mentioned that I guess EDF and the French are taking nukes offline this winter for maintenance, and this will affect LNG markets. Can you speak to that a little bit? How much?
So we're still trying to find out the specifics, but last week EDF did announce that they are going to be taking quite a few nukes offline, which usually happens during shoulder season. So we have seen some huge nominal capacities for gas coming to France from either Germany or from other countries to fill the needs for France over the winter. So you have Germany trying to take some of their nukes offline. There's just the one just fascinating thing about LNG is you have so many different competing fuels. So when there's a situation like with France where they're taking off nuclear power, that's most likely going to be met by natural gas or coal to a certain degree.
Have you written something on this?
My colleagues have. I could see you offline and send that over to you.
We're picking on Chris. Good job, all three of you. Please tell me that you're not going to have a window for LNG prices like jet fuel in Europe and some of the fuel oil in Asia. But that's been the bane of the industry is the Platts window. Market is gone. Now, a market like LNG, I think, has some particular vulnerabilities to having a small sample to begin with. 30 isn't very big or whatever you're doing. Window trading, it sort of cuts down on the workload, but also limits the amount of useful information that's getting into the market. So just a piece of advice. First of all, tell me if I'm right or wrong. And secondly, if I'm wrong in that you're not doing it in a window, good for you.
E-window, no comment. But I will say on the record that the portfolio players do want it and the traders do not want it. So we're trying to juggle both. We go to Geneva or Dubai or Singapore where we talk to the traders. No, E-window, we do not want it. But if we talk to Qatar or Shale, who do not share much information with us now, they're looking for E-window. Could talk to you more about that offline, but that's all we can say right now.
There's two there. And then we'll go to you.
Sorry, I can grab it. I'm Peter Ballas from DOE. I'm confused. Is the United States natural gas prices going to be better integrated into world gas pricing, or is it going to become balkanized with Henry Hub integrated into the world, Marcellus all stuck? That's one question.
I think the only example I've seen of how LNG and small volumes have affected gas prices today was Cheniere had their first full maintenance that happened last month, and the CEO announced when they expect it to come online, when they expect to stop taking feed gas deliveries to Sabine Pass. That day came and they were still taking feed gas deliveries, so that affected the NYMEX prompt month price. That's the only instance where I've seen LNG prices affect. Will it be a global price? If we get to 2020, 2021, 9 BCF a day exporting, at that point, we're producing 85 BCF. That's a conservative number. We're already producing 75 BCF. How much will that be affected?
I'd say it's going to be a more efficient market, but you can't change the fact that gas via LNG is a very expensive, very capital expensive in particular notion in value chain. It's not just the liquefaction, which is the steepest cost, but it's the ships and it's the FSRU and ultimately the power equipment. So for incremental value chains to be built, those costs are going to have to be covered. So there will still be a regional difference from one to another to cover those costs. But then the efficiency that can be wrung out of it is pretty amazing. So if all of a sudden we're taking from Brownsville to the Middle East, for example, and then we do a swap with Qatar instead, and we take Brownsville to Spain, something like 6 ships falls out of the trade. 6 ships times $200 million is $1.2 billion. So there's going to continue to be efficiencies that are taken out. But it's very much an oligopoly. I think Chris's slide was great. You know, it's very much still an oligopolistic kind of market with a lot of control within, portfolios. So there's an opaqueness associated with just how low can prices, efficiently go.
I'm just slaughter with delight. Chris, you contrasted two business models, the Sabine Pass business model, which is back to supply and forward into markets, versus the Cove Point, which is a tolling-only model. Can the two of you talk about the pros and cons of those approaches and whether there's likely to be a dominant model? Is just tolling viable, or will there be a mix?
I got my thought, but you go first, because I'd like to ask you this anyways.
Okay.
Good question.
I just came back from Japan last week. It was really interesting. I've been there a couple times this year, but I'm sensing a real flipping, in the global customer world, of additional interest in making sure that additional LNG supplies are developed. They're the traditional customers, so they understand that if there's an undersupply, then it's going to impact them. It might be 5 years from now, but they care about 5 years from now. Tolling versus FOB is a different ballgame. I think there will be very few, if any, substantial projects developed on the tolling model, because it takes a strong balance sheet, it takes a courage, it takes knowledge to be able to go out and source your own gas supply in the United States. And most of these customers, Japanese, Koreans, Chinese, Spaniards, they don't know what Henry Hub is, except that what Chris's graph says, that it looks like it's better and less volatile most of the time. But to go find a Apache or a Chesapeake and say, will you give me 20 years of gas supply? It's an interesting dynamic. So increasingly, we're seeing customers want either FOB, or we're trying to push it more towards the delivered at place model and build the full value chain so that can then be optimized.
Sorry, one more quick, just to build on that. Cove Point is on the doorstep of Marcellus and Utica, and I incorrectly assumed when I met with the off-takers of Cove Point, congratulations, this is wonderful. You are pulling from Dominion South, it's trading at $1.20. Well done. They kind of put their head down and said, we wish we got that. The amount of expertise that you need to source the gas, build a contract for the gas, secure the pipeline capacity, the nominations, storage, force majeure. The further you go upstream and the amount of expertise for a foreign entity, say from Asia, it is much more challenging. So I think the learning curves will be steep to start, and if someone can figure it out, tolling models might have a role, but I agree with Kevin.
Well, you have to realize the differential between Henry Hub and Marcellus is because of the opportunity cost of shipping it to get to the same place.
Yes.
And it's not cheaper because it has less value. It's cheaper because they have to pay more to get where they want to get one.
That's right.
We have a natural gas grid today that was built during World War II, where you're taking enormous amounts of Gulf gas and telescopic pipelines where it gets smaller and smaller where you go to the Northeast, as Kathleen mentioned. When you try to backhaul or flip those, it's truly, the market's being turned upside down. It's a lot more difficult to do than what I'm expecting. That's why you have that huge differential.
I'm sorry. We just look at that. We reached a point where we've got a fully looped system, and all the turnaround capabilities. So we're my first tranche. I'm sorry.
So are you asking, has that?
Just tagging on to your comment. That fact, this is maybe worse than.
Yeah.
Question for Kathleen, sorry. On one of your slides, you mentioned some regions where you've seen uptick in demand recently, and you mentioned Egypt. You've shown Egypt as shown up. I wonder how much of this is temporary and how much is permanent. I'm asking this because we've heard some news stories about some of Egypt's traditional suppliers have reduced supplies to them or cut supplies to them because of credit issues and non-payment issues. So I wonder how much of this is just to offset this development.
It's a good question, and it's really hard to say. I mean, I remember when we put our first 2 FSRUs into Argentina, everybody said Argentina has the second most shale gas to the United States, and so that's temporary. Well, that was 10 years ago, and I don't know of any shale gas that's getting produced in Argentina. Will Israel ever, take Leviathan over to Egypt? I just don't know. It could
Israel
happen.
just put out the tender for another FSRU.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, they're importing and wanting to import more. It's the drug thing. I mean, it's, I think FSRUs have outmoded pipelines. Because why do you want to invest in something that gives you one option, which is to go from A to B, when you can have the option to go to A through Z and that's what you're starting to see. Indonesia, Malaysia, they're importers and they're exporters, and they're not linking their grids via pipelines. They're linking them via LNG because it's more flexible.
Let's do Peter, and then we'll come over here.
Feeling sorry for John, so I'll play devil's advocate with you, John. If we successfully are exporting crude oil out of the Gulf Coast, why do we need a Keystone Pipeline?
Well, as a former pipeliner, I think you need one just as a matter of fact. And you need, look, for a future energy supply, you need robust, redundant, and reliable systems. And that includes everything. And that includes Keystone and all the other infrastructure that we have. It's different types of oils. It is, again, adding more supply for the U.S. in total from varied sources, which is always a good thing for reliability. And, how much are we going to export? Well, some of that export is that high-quality Gulf oil that is probably not much you're going to get through Keystone.
Thank you first for your presentation because I have a lot of questions to ask you for the different aspects. Basic aspect is about, I'm a bit confused with the price. You mentioned, for instance, the imports or the exports of LNG from the US, and basically this is a basic economy. If you want to export, you need the import price in Europe, in Japan or elsewhere, to be export price plus transportation and liquefaction. My concern is about the fact that today we have a small increase in the price of the gas in the US, and of course the price, especially in Japan and in Asia and also in Europe, is more decreasing. So how do you see the future of this? Can we see a unified price due to LNG over the world, and in which case how to ensure the competitiveness, the economics of exporting gas, and especially of covering the cost of liquefaction. So how do you see this evolution of price, taking into account the fact that, for instance, when you are in Europe, you have a huge source of gas, you have 2 huge sources of gas, which are simply pipe gas coming from Russia and from Norway, and the same when you look at Asia, you have a huge potential of gas coming from Central Asia and coming from Russia. You had this huge contract, you remember, between China and Russia signed to will it be put and forced? We don't know, but this is the situation. So how do you see the situation of prices? Thank you.
Those questions you bring up are, man, John, if I knew the answer to that, I'd be drinking a pina colada on an island. My background's in coal. I still think coal is going to play a large role, and I constantly think that coal is going to be, LNG will always be competing with coal. I think as more renewables are brought online, natural gas will handle the intermittency. In terms of your question of the global gas price, the biggest hurdle is when you ship a barrel of crude, the percentage of your total cost deals with transportation is just so small. Shipping rates are extremely low today, but when, as Professor Ripple discussed yesterday, when they were at $130,000 a day for charter rates, it took $3 an MMBTU to get to Japan. The percentage of total cost involved in transportation of natural gas is just, I think, too high and too volatile to really develop a global gas price, in my opinion.
I agree with you. I think there's so many externalities, but ultimately the cost of the infrastructure has to get covered and has to get financed. So it's not like you can build a liquefaction plant and you can build an FSRU and just assume, that you're going to find the ships. So I think value chains will continue to build this business. But I think there are other things that we can't even fathom that could happen. Like I think about Eastern Australia as a big wild card. Everybody thinks about Australia as being sunk cost, stupid investments in LNG. Well, it might be true in Gorgon. Apologies. I was at Shale when we took it there. So, but you look at Eastern Australia, and this probably will resonate with you, there's an ongoing capital plan that's necessary to continue to develop the coal seam gas that's going into those sunk cost facilities. Will that continue to be something that is funded, or will shale gas in the Gulf of Mexico become more economic than making those decisions? So I think the good news is we're entering into an unknown territory, but it's rich with potential, and more potential for efficiency than anything else.
Well, I think we're out of time, but thank you all for great questions and great